When Meghan Markle appeared on the cover of Vanity Fair under the headline "Wild About Harry," it looked like the beginning of an extraordinary ascent. At that moment, she had something most actresses spend their entire careers chasing. She had global curiosity, a royal romance, glossy magazine attention, Hollywood interest, and a story that could be sold in almost any market in the world. She was no longer just the actress from Suits. She was the American woman dating Prince Harry, the most emotionally famous spare in the British royal family. For Meghan, it must have felt like the door had finally opened. Vanity Fair was not just another magazine cover, it was cultural validation. It was the type of platform that tells the entertainment industry, the fashion industry, and the wider media world that a person has arrived. And yet, when you look back now, that cover also feels like the first sign of a pattern that would follow Harry and Meghan for years. Enormous opportunity, huge attention, and then a strange inability to turn that attention into stable, long-term success. That is the real story. Not simply that Harry and Meghan made money after leaving the royal family. They did. Not that they had no offers. They had many. Not that they were ignored by the media. They were never ignored. The bigger question is how a couple with that much attention.
When Meghan Markle sat down with her favourite magazine at the time, Vanity Fair, she was cock-a-hoop, let me tell you. But this basically was one of the worst deals ever. Because you have to remember that we're talking about this particular cover, chums. Remember, I'm just wild about Harry. And we all now know the background to the story of this, about how Markle was unhappy with certain elements of the pictures, the frocks, the makeup, the hair. I mean, clearly the writing was on the wall. But as we found out in the last week, of course,
that much royal connection, that much public curiosity, and that many powerful contacts ended up with so many stalled projects, failed deals, awkward launches, and unanswered questions about where the money went. The Vanity Fair moment is a useful place to begin because it shows how Meghan understood image from the very start. She wanted the glossy version of the story. Not just a tabloid reveal, not just paparazzi shots or gossip columns. She wanted the kind of respectable, glamorous, fashion-adjacent platform that could place her among women who were not merely famous, but aspirational. Vanity Fair, Vogue, Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, these were the types of publications that mattered in the world Meghan had spent years trying to enter. The cover gave her status. It confirmed that she was no longer just trying to get into rooms, she was now the room people wanted to photograph. But even then, there were signs of tension. According to accounts that have circulated since, including reporting discussed in royal books and commentary, there were concerns around the way the piece developed. There were questions about the photographs, the styling, the tone, and how directly the Harry relationship would be handled. The palace reportedly did not want Meghan's royal connection turned into an uncontrolled publicity moment.
Meghan Markle and Prince Harry are allegedly running short of cash. And the reason why they're running short of cash, many people might suggest, is simply that they are incredibly bad with money. I mean, you know, how can you get to this particular point? The other instance I wanted to highlight was that, well, basically, when you look a little bit deeper, you can see exactly how Meghan and Harry, time and time again, have let wonderful opportunities slip through their fingers, starting with this one. You know, Vanity Fair at that particular point.
Meghan, however, still had her own publicist, her own representation, her own instincts, and her own idea of what the moment should be. This is important because Meghan was not yet fully inside the royal system, but she was already close enough to create complications. Once a person becomes publicly tied to a senior royal, the rules change. The palace expects discipline. Timing matters, messaging matters, access matters. The relationship is no longer just private. Every public move becomes part of the monarchy's image. Meghan, by contrast, came from an entertainment world where attention is currency. A magazine cover, a flattering feature, a glamorous photograph, a hint of romance, a carefully placed interview. These are tools. They are not threats. They are how a profile is built. So from the beginning, there was a clash between two systems. The palace system says, wait, coordinate, avoid overexposure, protect the institution. The Hollywood system says, seize the moment, build the brand, control the narrative, use the heat while it is there. Meghan understood the second system far better than the first. But understanding attention is not the same as understanding business. That is one of the central criticisms now made of the Sussex project. Meghan and Harry appeared to believe that attention itself would become money.
To get this out there, not in just a tabloid form, but in a glossy form, something like Vanity Fair. It's the sort of thing that she grew up, reading, idolizing, and making sure that she sort of copied the looks. This was the dream. If you're a Hollywood wannabe, you want to be in things like Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, Vanity Fair, British Vogue, American Vogue. You can virtually do a terrible photo shoot, as we've seen on numbers of occasions, but it basically says to the industry, you're big, you're hot, and people want you. This was exactly what Meghan decided she wanted to do.
In the short term, that was true. Their royal exit, their grievance story, their conflict with the palace, and their personal revelations were all commercially valuable. Companies wanted them, streaming platforms wanted them, publishers wanted them, Oprah wanted the sit down, Netflix wanted the inside story, Spotify wanted royal audio content, Penguin Random House wanted the memoir. The first wave was real. The problem was what came after. Before Harry, Meghan had already shown that she knew how to cultivate a certain image. She moved in the right spaces, built useful relationships, and presented herself as stylish, independent, ambitious, and socially connected. She knew how to charm people. People who met her in those years often described someone who could be warm, attentive, flattering, and very focused on making an impression. That does not make her unusual. Hollywood is full of people who network, charm, reposition, and build themselves into something larger than their resume. Actors and actresses have always done this. The difference is that Meghan's eventual platform was not simply Hollywood, it was royalty. When Harry entered the picture, the stakes changed completely. To Harry, Meghan seemed worldly, confident, glamorous, and self-made.
And basically at this point, and this is again an interesting aside, they were kind of looking as to whether this was going to prove difficult dealing with Markle. Now we all know the editor has given his version of events, and apparently she wanted them at the 11th hour, according to Tom Bower in his book Revenge, to pull it because apparently the palace were unhappy. The palace were unhappy because part of the original agreement, which has never really been detailed before, was that from that point on, from the moment that she was going official, as it were, with Prince Harry, everything really just needed to be run past them. But Markle never did things by the book, as we've now seen. And she basically decided that she was just going to carry on as normal. She carried on as normal, having her own publicist, her own manager, and of course agents on both sides of the pond, because she was unsure whether this was literally going to hang out and work in her favour. Where this developed, and this is where I find interesting, I wanted to share this with you on a very special episode of By Royal Appointment, Chums, was really how both her and Harry not only lost the opportunity of thousands of pounds between them.
She knew London private members clubs, she had designer clothes, she had expensive looking taste. She had friends in media, fashion and entertainment. She had a television career. She appeared to know how the world worked. For a prince who had grown up inside palaces, protected from ordinary commerce, and surrounded by staff who handled details, that must have been impressive. Meghan looked like someone who could navigate the outside world better than he could. That is one reason Harry may have trusted her instincts so much. But the image was more complicated than it appeared. Meghan's acting career had brought recognition, but not the kind of fortune later suggested in some public narratives. She was not arriving with a massive entertainment empire behind her. She had worked hard, built a profile, and made herself visible. But she was not an Oprah, a Reese Witherspoon, a Gwyneth Paltrow, or a media mogul with a proven production machine. That distinction matters. There is a huge difference between being good at personal branding and being good at building a company. There is a difference between getting attention and sustaining a business. There is a difference between being photographed beautifully and creating content people will pay for again and again. Harry and Meghan's post-royal life often seems to have confused those things. The early relationship was wrapped in its own mythology.
Because clearly they're inept when it comes to business. But people around them, you kind of think, well, who was advising? It's interesting, as the superstar diva Liza Minnelli recently launched her book, Kids, You Won't Believe This. She points out exactly how she lost millions due to bad management, people signing up with her. And it's a sort of story of old. Every single person ends up being like this. Over here in Britain, we had a star called Kathy Kirby, very similar. Debbie Reynolds, her husband, got through all of her millions. You would have thought in this 21st century world, somebody like the Markle might have had.
Meghan later described asking whether Harry was kind. Harry presented the romance as almost fated. They leaned heavily into the idea of two people finding each other against the odds, with Meghan not fully understanding the royal world and Harry seeking someone who could see the real man beneath the title. But critics have never accepted that simple version. They point out that Meghan had long shown interest in fame, style, public image, and royal themes. She had visited London, posed near Buckingham Palace when younger, and reportedly read or known about material connected to Princess Diana. Harry, in turn, has built much of his emotional identity around his mother. For someone trying to connect with him, Diana was always going to be a powerful emotional entry point. None of this proves calculation in the darkest sense, but it does show that the fairy tale version of the romance was always incomplete. Meghan was not a naive outsider. Harry was not simply a prince meeting someone untouched by his world. They were two ambitious people, each dissatisfied in different ways, who quickly saw in each other the possibility of escape and reinvention. Harry had already expressed frustration with royal life. He liked parts of it.
Now, we all know the story about when Meghan first met Harry and, the meeting, and he was late and running in. We have his sanitized version of events. And of course, we have the fact that Meghan basically just said, is he nice? And we're supposed to really believe that is the version of events that Markle wanted you to know. Is he nice? And that was the only thing she was interested in. Not that he was rich, powerful, or indeed could escalate her failing career to the stratosphere.
The status, the causes, the military identity, the public affection, but he did not appear to love the discipline of lifelong service. Meghan, meanwhile, understood that marrying Harry could offer global recognition far beyond anything Suits had given her. Together, they imagined a third path, not fully royal, not fully private, not trapped inside the institution, but not cut off from its power either. The half-in, half-out idea that later collapsed at Sandringham appears to have been the dream. Royal status, global commercial freedom, charitable work, celebrity access, and financial independence. To them, perhaps it sounded modern and reasonable. To the late Queen, it was impossible. The monarchy could not allow senior royal status to become a commercial passport. If Harry and Meghan were allowed to pick the glamorous parts of the role while monetizing their titles abroad, the whole structure would be weakened. Other royals would face pressure to do the same. Companies would pay for proximity to the crown. Public service and private profit would become blurred. The Queen said no. That should have been the moment Harry and Meghan understood the scale of the problem. Instead, they appear to have believed they could make it work anyway. Their belief was not entirely irrational. In the beginning, the world did throw money and attention at them. Oprah Winfrey had shown interest before the wedding. Hollywood figures wanted meetings.
And was already dating someone else, a celebrity chef. Meghan knew that she was in fact very beautiful, very much available, and beguiling. She certainly knows how to work a room. I've met many different people over the years that were first captured by her. Friends that she, suddenly disliked, liked everything that you liked, became the best thing, called you up, asked your advice on fashion, hair, makeup, beauty, flattered you to the extreme. A very, very clever manipulator. And what's interesting, you see, is this really, and I buy him, what other reason could it be? But you see, what really enraptured Harry was the fact that she seemed very self-possessed, very much like her own person, and she seemingly knew all the right people, cultivating the good and the great along the way. You see, one of the big things that she did was each time she turned up to London, she wasn't schlepping it in some budget hotel, nor was she staying in five-star deluxes like the Dorchester, the Ritz, etc., mingling with the good and the great. But she was in a very exclusive private members club, free gratis, right? And so in return,
Streaming ideas were being floated even while they were still connected to royal life. There were reports of early conversations involving major entertainment names, including ideas that did not fit what the Sussexes wanted but showed that the interest was there. The market saw value in them. But the market mostly saw value in one thing: royal inside information. That is the painful truth at the centre of the Sussex business model. Companies did not pay for Harry and Meghan because they had proven they could produce hit shows, build consumer brands, run studios, or deliver best-selling lifestyle products year after year. They paid because Harry and Meghan had access to the royal story. The most valuable product was not compassion. It was not inspiration. It was not service. It was not feminism, mental health, cooking, polo, or philanthropy. The most valuable product was proximity to the monarchy and conflict with the monarchy. That explains the Oprah interview. As television, it was a global event. As a personal statement, it was dramatic. As a business decision, it may have been far less clever than it looked. Harry and Meghan had one truly explosive interview in them. One major sit-down where they could tell the world why they left, how they felt, what they believed happened, and how badly they thought they had been treated. Once that story was told, its commercial power
for publicity in return for mentioning this. Consequently, she got to meet some very influential people, and she was ready to meet anybody that she felt could escalate her particular brand. When Harry came along, this was, bingo. And not only that, what was even more interesting to Harry was, clearly she must be this self-made person because she had wonderful designer clothes, she smelt beautifully, and he noted that her makeup, or her friend pointed out to him, that her makeup in her makeup bag was very expensive indeed. This woman had to be successful.
Began to shrink. They may have gained sympathy from some audiences, especially in America, but they also created permanent distrust with the royal family and alienated large parts of the British public. They turned family pain into content, they made reconciliation harder, and they tied their brand to grievance. That is a dangerous foundation for long-term success. Grievance sells once, it may sell twice. But eventually, audiences ask, what else do you have? Netflix was supposed to answer that question. The public figure often repeated around the Netflix deal was enormous, with many reports using the idea of a $100 million arrangement. But deals like that are rarely simple cash transfers. They are usually tied to production, deliverables, development, performance, and future projects. The headline number creates prestige, but the actual money depends on what gets made and how valuable it is. The project Netflix really wanted was obvious. The royal story, the documentary about Harry and Meghan, their relationship, their exit, their version of events, and their conflict with the palace. That was the crown jewel of the deal. That was the content no one else could provide. But after that, the results became much less convincing. Heart of Invictus had a worthy subject, but it did not become a major cultural phenomenon.
What people truly forget with Meghan and Harry is this wasn't just a solo affair, Both of them allegedly wanted time out from the very off. Harry had already basically said to Meghan Markle that he didn't really want necessarily a life of royal service. He liked the perks, clearly, but didn't want to do all the sort of things that were attached to it. This had really appealed, as you can imagine, to Meghan Markle and the ideas. Very quickly, she decided that this could be a life for her. And likewise, both of them very quickly, even upon the very first meetings, and Harry had detailed all about his mother. Remember, she knew nothing about the British monarchy.
Polo struggled to justify why a broad audience should care. Meghan's lifestyle programming required production costs, locations, staff, style, and polish. But the question remained whether viewers wanted Meghan as a lifestyle authority once the royal drama was removed. That is the production trap. Harry and Meghan may have imagined themselves as global content creators, but creating content is hard. It is expensive. It requires teams, structure, consistency, creative discipline, and the ability to generate ideas that do not depend on the same royal story. Their problem was not access to platforms, their problem was output. Spotify exposed the same weakness. The reported numbers around that deal were also huge, but again, the reality was more complicated. Spotify did not simply want Meghan alone speaking occasionally about broad cultural themes. The power of the deal was Harry and Meghan together, a royal couple in audio. Their conversations, their network, their insights, their chemistry, their access. Instead, after a long delay, the main product became Meghan's podcast, Archetypes. It had a launch, it had celebrity guests, and it attracted attention. But it did not become the lasting audio empire Spotify had likely hoped for. When the deal ended, one Spotify executive famously criticized them harshly.
You may have forgotten, of course, that the Disney boss, Jeffrey Katzenberg, was the very first person to privately meet with Harry and Meghan inside Kensington Palace with an idea about setting up kind of some streaming plot. And the idea he came up with, I think, was about, pets, and that wasn't what they were looking for. At this particular point, it has to be said that they were not necessarily looking to dump the royal family. Harry truly believed that Her Majesty the Queen would in fact want to embrace his idea of a separate life. The half in, half out, the sort of Sandringham deal, whatever you want to call it, that well. And this is because of what he told her. And she'd seen the way that the Queen was with Harry and figured that this really wouldn't be a problem. Meghan, though, was looking for global fame. And this is really where the money starts to come into, the play. Because again, Oprah Winfrey let slip in an interview from the very off that she was trying to secure a sit down with Meghan. Now, at this point, she could not have foreseen exactly the sort of interview that was going to take place. At this point, she just kind of wanted a pre-wedding interview, a potted history of her life. According to sources, Meghan wasn't keen.
That comment became part of the public narrative. The idea that Harry and Meghan had received a massive opportunity and under-delivered. That perception has followed them ever since. Then came the smaller projects, the attempted pivots, and the brand experiments. There was the TIG, often described by supporters as evidence Meghan had lifestyle credentials. But the TIG was a blog. It showed taste, networking, and ambition, but it was not the same as a major consumer business. It did not prove she could build a Gwyneth Paltrow-style empire. There was The Bench, the children's book, that received attention because Meghan wrote it, but did not become a lasting publishing phenomenon. There were animated project ideas, including Pearl, that did not survive. There were reports and rumors about fashion partnerships, luxury ambassador roles, and connections to brands like Dior or Cartier. But nothing seemed to become the transformative deal that would place Meghan securely in the luxury world. There was Lemonada Media, which looked like a quieter attempt to revive audio ambitions, but it did not carry the same prestige as Spotify. There was Clever Coffee, which resurfaced occasionally in the press. There were reports of investments or associations with smaller brands. There was, as ever, Meghan's lifestyle and product project involving jam, home goods, and a carefully curated domestic aesthetic.
Because this would mean a lot of scrutiny into her background, her life, and there were many varying degrees of stories already out there. You get the picture. And as this week's proven, it's interesting, you see, because obviously with the falling case of the Daily Mail, Meghan and Harry thought they were untouchable. They were the golden gods that people were going to throw money at. And they did. But not Oprah Winfrey. You see, Oprah's a very clever and shrewd operator. If there's a big story in town and people wanted to sit down with her, she may have gone off kilter of late, but we're talking the big hitters, the Whitney Houstons, the Michael Jacksons, the
But none of these has yet answered the central question: what is Meghan's actual commercial lane? Is she a producer, a lifestyle founder, a podcaster, a philanthropist, a royal commentator, without saying she is a royal commentator, a wellness figure, A fashion figure, a speaker, a documentary subject, a duchess in exile. The brand has never fully settled. That lack of clarity is expensive. When a public figure launches one project after another without a clear core, the market begins to hesitate. Companies start asking whether the attention is worth the risk. Does the public love her or merely watch her? Will customers buy the product or just mock the launch? Does the association bring prestige or controversy? Will the project get finished? Will it create value? Harry faces a different version of the same problem. His strongest identity remains service. Veterans, Invictus, mental health, military community, and childhood trauma. When he is in those spaces, he can still appear sincere and effective. But commercially, he has also become tied to confession, royal complaint, and personal revelation. Spare was a huge book because it promised access. It promised the inside story of royal life. William, Charles, Camilla, Meghan, Diana, and the emotional history of the Spare Prince. But once Harry told those stories, what was left for another book?
That came through was in fact the Oprah Winfrey deal, long before Netflix. Netflix came in around about the same time, but this is where they made their very first big mistake. And it was a huge mistake because you only get one roll of the dice. But Meghan Markle felt that she could easily pull this back because once people had heard her and seen her, well, the work was going to come in. Forget the voiceover with Disney at that, the premiere. That was another disaster. Didn't pay big, wasn't the big result, and no further work came through. Once he sat down with Oprah, the doyen of chat shows, well, then people would realise the hardship they'd gone through and the work would come flooding in. You know, the Oprah deal has to be one of the worst in television history in many respects because they are now the hottest couple, right? And this was big fanfare stuff. But this, as I say, was what Meghan really wanted. And you see this a lot with people who really desire fame and attention. They're willing to let go of many things to get top billing. I remember Lana Turner pointing out that, better to have your name bigger than the title than to take a little bit more money. And this is really what drove Meghan along. Harry had no idea.
Reported publishing arrangement was often described as a multi-book deal. Yet the momentum after Spare changed. Harry chose not to heavily update the paperback with fresh revelations, which suggested either restraint, exhaustion, legal caution, or simply a lack of appetite for another round of royal war at that moment. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. The biggest publishing card had already been played. That is the trap of tell-all economics. The first confession is valuable. The second may still sell. By the third, the public begins to feel manipulated or bored. The person telling the story risks becoming dependent on reopening wounds. For Harry, that is emotionally dangerous. For Meghan, it is commercially limiting. For both of them, it makes reconciliation with the monarchy almost impossible. And yet, reconciliation, or at least visible royal connection, remains their most valuable asset. That is why their return to Highgrove matters. In this financial story, on the surface, it was a family meeting with King Charles. But in brand terms, it also gave the Sussexes something they badly need: proof of contact with the crown. They did not get the public photograph many commentators believe would have been priceless. They did not get a grand royal reset. They did not get a formal route back into official life. But the fact of the meeting itself
show that he'd signed to Netflix because his father had cut him off. Another lie. It turned out that His Majesty the King had indeed decided to fund the duo for a period at least of a year to see how they got on. Why would Harry say this? Many suspect he said it because he was totally embarrassed by the fact that now he was turning into something of a micro-celebrity. And even at this point, he could see his dream of living in Africa, conversation stuff, all of that was just falling apart. Meghan was in her element. But the fact on this particular deal is this. It's always banded around that this was 100 million. It never was. It truly never was 100 million. Yes, there were millions involved, but this was on the return and receipt of said programs. And the idea originally was that they were going to both sit down and come up with a raft of ideas. The only one that Netflix really wanted was the one that we saw, the royal dossier of gossip.
Still helped them. It reminded the world that they are not simply ex-royals in California, they are still connected by blood to the king. That connection may be emotionally meaningful. It is also commercially powerful. This is why critics argue that Harry and Meghan have not truly built independence. They have built distance from royal duty while still depending on royal proximity. Their value rises when they are seen near the monarchy and falls when they have to stand entirely on their own output. That is the uncomfortable pattern. When the subject is royal conflict, the world watches. When the subject is Meghan's jam, Harry's polo show, or another lifestyle extension, the response is weaker. When Harry talks about William, people pay attention. When he gives speeches without that royal drama attached, the reaction is less certain. When Meghan is discussed as a duchess wronged by the palace, she dominates headlines. When she is positioned as an entrepreneur selling products, people ask whether the products themselves justify the attention. This is not because they have no talent at all. It is because their strongest asset remains the one they claim to have escaped. Money, therefore, becomes the measure of the contradiction. Harry and Meghan are not poor. They live a life of enormous privilege. They have wealthy friends.
Really worth the money. And all of that deal eventually turned up under 10 million, not the 100 million. So suddenly they had to come up with other things. Heart of Invictus, remember that. Polo, all disasters, Meghan Markle's cookery show. A lot of that stuff was lost on production because it was a big production to film. She didn't want to film in her own house, so suddenly there's location fees, freelancers, sign-off, NDAs, you name it. They can suddenly escalate those costs. What should have been retained inside Markle and Harry's money purse, well, they were letting go because this was going to be the thing that was going
a valuable home, global name recognition, security arrangements, staff, lawyers, agents, advisors, and access most people could never imagine. But they also have expensive obligations. Their lifestyle costs money. Their security costs money. Their public relations costs money. Their productions cost money. Their legal battles cost money. Their brand experiments cost money. If the early giant deals are not replaced by new income, the pressure grows. That does not mean they are on the edge of ordinary financial hardship. It means their chosen life requires a level of income that cannot be sustained by headlines alone. The question now is what offer they take next. That decision matters because it will signal how the market sees them. If they secure a major prestige deal, they can claim the second act has begun. If they move into smaller, less glamorous partnerships, critics will say the decline has become visible. If Meghan becomes a paid speaker, people will ask what she can speak about beyond herself. If Harry returns to more confessional content, people will say the royal well has not run dry, but the dignity has. The speaking circuit is not simple either. Harry can speak about mental health, veterans, grief, resilience and service.
It took them how long to come up with something? And if you remember right from the off, you could see that Prince Harry knew he was a man cornered. When they made that very first trailer, she said, "Oh, you say your accent's a lot better than mine." So she knew really at that point she had no ideas. And why would she? She's a former actress that's been given a few sheets of lines to learn on minuscule moments in episodes. She'd never created anything. Oh, people talk about the TIG and oh, marvellous. Anybody could set one of those up. And what you're now seeing is she had a lot of help with that. And what you're seeing with As Ever is the fact that she's now on her own. Give or take one or two people that are willing to hold the...
But the more headlines focus on old partying, drug references, family conflict or personal awkwardness, the harder it becomes to sell him as an inspirational figure without baggage. Meghan can speak about leadership, women, media, identity and entrepreneurship. But if audiences see her as someone whose own businesses have struggled to land, the credibility gap becomes a problem. Royalty is not like politics or entertainment. A politician can survive scandal by winning votes. A comedian can survive embarrassment by turning it into material. A celebrity can reinvent through shock. Royalty relies on dignity, restraint, and mystique. Once those are weakened, the commercial version of royalty becomes unstable. That instability has been visible in their attempts to create royal-style tours. The Sussexes have appeared to enjoy visits that look and feel like royal tours, even though they are no longer working royals. These trips generate coverage, but they also create confusion. Are they representing themselves, their foundation, a cause, a brand, a memory of royal status, the monarchy by another name? If such trips do not translate into lasting income, partnerships, or public goodwill, then they become expensive attention exercises. The same is true of their website and public archive of achievements.
When Spotify didn't work out, and let me tell you, they did not pay 20 million. They paid enough money, but they certainly never got their return, because really the idea at the beginning was that this was going to be Harry and Meghan. I mentioned this before. It was never just going to be lumbered with Markle, but Markle always has to be the one. So consequently, they didn't get what they wanted, and ultimately at the end of it, an unmitigated disaster again. We move on to Lemonada. You'll notice there was no fee attached to this particular project because, well, there wasn't really any money. This was a sort of sale of return. You market it, you get out there stuff. Along the way, they missed vast opportunities, unique opportunities. If you think about the bands, do you remember the stress bands that Meghan Markle, that was the best that they could come up with. The team around her at that time, that was the very best. The decline had already set in. Along the way, she did interviews with Variety and various other things, but nothing truly was hitting. But she felt, as ever, was the key brand. What was interesting about this particular era is it got really bad because then they were spinning stories about how Meghan was going to be an ambassador for Dior and, of course, Cartier.
If they want to present their post-royal life as a series of successes, they have to define what those successes are. Invictus remains Harry's strongest achievement, but it began before Meghan and before the royal exit. Archewell exists, but it has not become a cultural institution. Netflix brought attention, but mixed results. Spotify ended badly, the bench faded, Pearl disappeared. As ever, is still trying to prove itself. That is why the question, where did the money go, has become so pointed. It is not only about bank accounts, it is about opportunity cost. Where did the Vanity Fair momentum go? Where did the royal wedding goodwill go? Where did the Oprah audience go? Where did the Netflix prestige go? Where did the Spotify promise go? Where did the publishing power go? Where did the global curiosity go? The answer is that much of it was spent on grievance, control, and short-term attention rather than building durable institutions. Harry and Meghan could have taken a slower route. They could have left royal life, spent several quiet years building credibility, focused on a narrow set of causes, avoided direct attacks on the family, and developed products or media projects with real expertise behind them. They could have allowed the public to miss them. Instead, they saturated the market with themselves.
For his father's coronation, if Meghan had gone along, there could have been some bucks attached in that. But again, Markle didn't want to do it. She wanted it on her terms. Where do we sit and what do we look at now in terms of money? Well, they're not poor by any stretch of the imagination, and they have a lot of wealthy friends. And as we've seen recently, the Kardashians were willing to invite them to the 70th birthday, but that turned sour very quickly. Their move into the world of movies has stalled. I mean, you know, the Cookie Queens thing, Meet Me at the Lake, No Way Out. I mean, you can just see where this is turning.
Interview, documentary, podcast, memoir, brand launch, lawsuit, public statement, award, speech, another interview, another project, another criticism, another claim. For a while, the volume created power. Eventually, it created fatigue. This is why the Sussex story now feels less like a meteoric rise and more like a warning about mistaking fame for strategy. Fame opens doors. Strategy decides what happens after you walk through them. Meghan was excellent at reaching the door. Harry was born inside the most famous door in the world. Together, they had access to rooms few people ever see. But access is not achievement. Being wanted for one explosive story is not the same as being trusted with a long-term business. And in business, trust matters. Partners want reliability. They want delivery. They want a clear audience. They want public figures who enhance a brand without constantly creating risk. They want products that sell after the headlines fade. They want the talent to be worth the trouble. That is the test Harry and Meghan now face. Their greatest error may have been treating each major deal as proof of success before the work had actually been done. The Oprah interview was treated as vindication, the Netflix deal was treated as an empire, the Spotify announcement was treated as a creative breakthrough, the book deal was treated as literary power, the lifestyle relaunch was treated as commercial rebirth.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because people talked about Harry doing speeches around the world. But as we saw recently, he decided to do a speech for Invictus and even make a joke about his own personal hair loss. It bombed dramatically. All of those things are analysed by people that might want to book you as an inspirational speaker. The problem that you have now are things like this. The pill-popping headline of the prince, the party prince, albeit years ago, will not be easy to shake off. You might say, well, what about other people that have done wrong things or whatever, like say the Deputy British Prime Minister Angela Rayner? Politics is different. Royalty is something on its own. Meghan Markle's never really actually got up and given a speech. She said a few words about herself normally, but not necessarily an inspirational leadership speech. That apparently is the route now that her team feel she could go down in order to, kickstart whatever they want to be doing.
But in every case, the announcement generated more confidence than the finished product. That is dangerous because announcements are easy. Delivery is where reputations are made. In Hollywood and media, people can survive one overhyped project. They can even survive two. But if the pattern repeats, the industry begins to classify them. Not publicly, perhaps. The publicists will still speak warmly, executives will still use careful language, but behind closed doors, the question becomes, are they worth the money, the time, and the risk? Harry and Meghan's challenge is that they are both high profile and high maintenance in the public imagination. Even if that reputation is unfair, in some individual cases, it now exists. A brand considering Meghan has to ask whether the press coverage will focus on the product or on Meghan herself. A platform considering Harry has to ask whether the project will become about the cause or about his family history. A production partner has to ask whether the couple can generate ideas beyond their own biography. That is where the royal story becomes both asset and trap. It is the reason people open the door, but it is also the reason they hesitate to go further. Royal association brings instant attention, but it brings scrutiny, division, and fatigue.
Well, they're not poor by any stretch of the imagination, and they have a lot of wealthy friends. And as we've seen recently, the Kardashians were willing to invite them to the 70th birthday, but that turned sour very quickly. Their move into the world of movies has stalled. I mean, the Cookie Queens thing, Meet Me at the Lake, No Way Out. I mean, you can just see where this is turning very badly. They have enough income, but if you look at Penguin Random House,
it can make a launch enormous. It can also make failure more visible. This is especially true for Meghan because her public image has become so intensely interpreted. A jar of jam is not just a jar of jam. A flower arrangement is not just a flower arrangement. A dress, a bracelet, a photograph, a kitchen counter, a brand name, a delay, a missing product, a limited launch, all of it becomes evidence in a larger public trial about who Meghan really is. That is exhausting for any business. A lifestyle brand needs customers to enter a mood of trust and desire. They need to think, I want a piece of that world. But if every product is immediately dragged into a culture war, the emotional experience changes. Some supporters may buy out of loyalty, but broader customers may step back. They may not want to feel they are voting in a royal argument every time they purchase a candle, jam, tea, or home product. That is why Meghan's brand needs distance from the feud more than it needs another royal headline. The same is true for Harry and his charitable identity. Invictus works because it is bigger than Harry. It has real participants, real sacrifice, real emotion, and real purpose. When Harry is simply the patron and supporter, he gains dignity from the cause.
They thought this was going to be a different way round, that maybe the king was ready to kiss and make up and come up with everything that they may have wanted. It didn't work out like that. Now, as I told you in a previous video, Meghan and Harry would like the website reflected on their successes. It's a very dangerous game to do that when you consider what are the successes. Even the bench has gone AWOL. We don't see that anywhere in any charity shop, any sales. You cannot get it anywhere because seemingly in Meghan's eyes, what was brilliant, now of course she doesn't want to be...
When the Sussex drama surrounds the event, the cause risks being used as a backdrop to his personal story. For Harry, the best commercial decision may actually be less commercial ambition. Fewer interviews, fewer confessional projects, fewer attempts to explain, more discipline, more focus. More proof that he can serve without turning service into autobiography. For Meghan, the best decision may be the opposite of the old Vanity Fair instinct. Less emphasis on being seen as important and more emphasis on making something customers actually return to. A real business can survive mockery if the product is excellent. But no amount of perfect lighting can save a brand that does not know what it is selling. This is why advisors matter. One of the recurring questions around Harry and Meghan is who was telling them no? Who was saying the Oprah interview might damage long-term trust? Who was warning that Spotify would require regular, disciplined production? Who was explaining that Netflix needed more than royal grievance? Who was telling Meghan that luxury brands would not automatically hand over prestige just because she had a title? Who was telling Harry that personal revelation has a cost? Perhaps people did say these things and were ignored. Perhaps the advice was divided.
The problem now that you have, really, if you're Meghan and Harry, is simply this. Their big attempts at turning, fake royal tours into money spinners didn't work out any better either. The recent trip to Australia was a disaster because, again, although Meghan had sort of involved herself in the, I don't know what it was, some order online thing, that didn't necessarily take off. Masses of bad press with Bondi Beach, Wherever you turn, it seemed a disaster. Meghan allegedly invested in a handbag brand. You never hear anything of that now, do you? Clever Coffee popped up a couple of weeks back, but again, another sort of disaster.
Perhaps the couple believed their own instincts were stronger than the experience of everyone around them. Whatever happened, the results suggest that attention was often mistaken for strategy. The first act was royal escape. The second act was royal revenge. The third act was supposed to be empire. But the empire has not arrived. What exists instead is a collection of fragments. A lifestyle brand still trying to define itself. A production company with mixed output. A foundation with limited public identity. A prince still tied to old wounds. A duchess still chasing the perfect platform. And a couple whose commercial value rises every time the palace door opens even slightly. That is why Highgrove felt so significant. It suggested that, despite everything, the royal connection is not dead. For Harry personally, that may matter deeply. For Meghan commercially, it matters too. But it also highlights the central weakness of their independence. If you need the monarchy to validate your brand, you are not truly free of it. The tragedy is that they really did have everything needed to build a sustainable new life. They had recognition, sympathy from many, access to elite advisors, money, global platforms, and the fascination of the public. Few people in modern media have ever been given such a strong launch.
The things that she promised us at the start of this year have not come to fruition. She started it out thinking that last Christmas, the big Netflix Christmas special would pave the way to one-off seasonal specials. Netflix decided no thank you. They've given them a little bit of a leeway by basically saying, yes, we can move you into an executive producer role in movies. Does anybody truly think that's exactly what's going to happen? And what's interesting is, as the Daily Mail case, as I say, really will now define them, along with those headlines. The Duke and Duchess had it all.
But they seem to have believed that being Harry and Meghan was enough. It was enough to get the first deals. It was not enough to keep them Now they need a genuine second act, and second acts are harder than first acts because the market is no longer buying potential, it is judging results. For Meghan, that means, as ever, must become more than a mood board, more than limited products, more than soft-focused domestic imagery. It has to sell, scale, and survive criticism. For Harry, it means returning to the areas where he still has credibility. Invictus, veterans, grief, service, and perhaps a quieter form of public work that does not depend on attacking his family. For both of them, it means understanding that royal proximity can create headlines, but it cannot build a business forever. The Vanity Fair cover once suggested Meghan had arrived. The Oprah interview suggested the Sussexes could dominate the world stage. The Netflix deal suggested they could become media power players. The Spotify deal suggested they could build an audio empire. The book deal suggested Harry's story could command extraordinary money. But years later, the question is not whether they got attention. They did. The question is what they built with it. And right now, that answer is far less impressive than the original promise. That is why the financial conversation around Harry and Meghan is not going away. It is not just gossip about rich people spending too much.
I mean, they could have made so much money and genuinely become financially independent. Their biggest mistake was believing they could do it themselves. Meghan took charge of all the meetings, all the contracts, seemingly though without much, I would say, seasoned advice. And ultimately, the deals that could have set them up for life have now gone out the window. Is there a second act? That's what they're hoping for. But right now, everybody's asking, a little like Fergie and Andrew, so where did the money?
It is a story about missed chances, weak execution, and the danger of believing that fame can replace discipline. They wanted freedom from the royal family. They wanted financial independence. They wanted global influence on their own terms. But independence requires more than leaving. It requires building something that can stand without the institution behind you. That is the challenge they have not yet solved. And until they do, every new deal, every product launch, every royal visit, every private meeting with the king, and every rumor about the next project will be judged against the same question. Where did the opportunity go? Because at the beginning, Harry and Meghan did not have too little. They had almost too much. Too much attention, too much curiosity, too much sympathy from some audiences, too much money on the table, too much confidence that the world would keep paying for whatever they chose to do next. But attention has a shelf life. Sympathy can curdle. Money has conditions. Platforms demand output. Brands need clarity. And the public, eventually, wants more than a story about leaving. It wants to know what you became after you left. That remains the unanswered question for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex.